So what this is not about is the impact of coaching. Hopefully everybody on this call or this webinar today understands how important coaching is. It'll be relevant for everybody who's an individual contributor. It'll be relevant if you're a manager. It'll be relevant if you're a VP of sales. We're not here to fight the corner for coaching. That's a given. I believe firmly, both in people I've coached and coaching I've received, coaching is about as close to a silver bullet as you can get in sales. Yeah, it's not done as often as it should be. And there's various different reasons for that. One, managers say they don't have the time. Managers often don't have the skills to do it. I was promoted into a managerial position because I was half decent at selling. I got no support, and it's very difficult to coach people. So there's various different reasons why it doesn't happen. We won't spend too much time bogged on those reasons, but what we are going to give you and leave you with is some actionable tips on how to coach, what it looks like, and hopefully just some tips. We've got 2 cold calls today that we're going to listen to, which are both good calls, but there's coaching moments in every call. So we're going to break them down, share some thoughts, and get involved. This is a live interactive webinar. We move pretty quickly, but if anybody has any questions, if you feel free to come on audio, come on camera, shout out your questions, or if you're a little bit shy, pop them in the chat and we'll monitor the chat and answer questions. But let's make it interactive. Owen and I are here to try and help you in any way we can. Feel free to pick our brains and ask questions and get involved. Owen, do you want to introduce yourself? Because I won't do it justice.
Okay, appreciate that.
Why should they listen to you, Owen? Let's tell them why they should listen to you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Owen Williams, representing the South by myself, it seems. Okay, why should people listen to me? Well, I have worked in sales all my working life to date. I'm 40 years young, only recently turned. First sales job was in '98, part-time at college. I was door knocking, selling for Anglian windows. So that really was a baptism of fire. And then from then on, I have stayed in sales because I conform to the stereotypical image of a salesperson. I'm a loudmouth, yeah. I am a good communicator. I talk lots. I'm not shy. All these things that fit the typical stereotype, but actually more and more nowadays, it's the introverts who are the really successful ones, the silent assassins, because they're excellent listeners. I am a great listener, of course. I can say this now confidently without it being arrogant, but I am a natural leader. I have been for a large part of my life, stemming from when I was playing sports. I was captain typically, head boy at school. Lots of different examples of me being a leader through life, and that's carried on through work. Because I genuinely care about people. I'm genuinely interested in people. I genuinely get a buzz out of helping people achieve their version of success. And as a sales leader, I'd like to think that people I've worked with will be able to attest that I pay a lot of focus and attention to coaching, to supporting one-to-one, recognizing that what works for him is not going to work for her, and you need to find out exactly how to get the best out of each individual by applying bespoke individual approaches to them. And I'm a big advocate for sales. I love to soak up new knowledge. There's lots of things I've listened to these calls beforehand, lots of things in these calls I don't necessarily practice, but that's not to say that I rubbish them. I'm all about the results. Plenty of ways to achieve results in sales, and that's ultimately what it's all about.
Nice, awesome, smash it. Thanks, Owen. And I guess for vouch for Owen as well. You and I have known each other for what, three and a bit years now.
Maybe a bit more, but yeah.
Bit more. So yeah, we worked together. Owen was a customer who actually brought Refract, as it was then, into his business, and Owen's one of these guys who he doesn't just speak a good game; he does it. He is in the trenches. He does coach. He wants to improve his team in a previous life when he was, sales director for a company. So I can vouch for Owen. I know a lot of people talk a good game, but he can back it up. So I know that personally. So yeah, and most of you probably know me because you see my face plus all over most of our webinars. I haven't got my sidekicks today, so Rich and Mark aren't with me. But yeah, I'm Stu. I'm sales director here at Allego. Similar to Owen, I've been in sales for a long time. Feels longer and longer every day. But started selling payment protection insurance and loans and all that kind of jazz. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm Martin Lewis's best friend. So I was outbound cold calling people in the middle of their dinner or tea. Depending on where you are in the country, interrupting them. I went on to sell used cars. So I've had the hard yards, a bit like between the three of us, I think we've had every worst job in sales, haven't we? Between the two of us, or we've had windows, double glazing, used cars, and payment protection insurance. So
I sold timeshare as well.
There you go. That's the complete four. That's the quartet. We've done it, been there and done it. But I guess what we're saying as well is, we have been there and done it. We've been individual contributors, managers, leaders. So what we're going to share with you is, why we think coaching is so important, and how you can get the best out of your team and how it works. But like I said, let's keep this interactive. Any questions you have as we go, give us a shout, and we'll, like I say, hopefully this is really valuable for everybody, and you'll leave this session with some actionable tips that if you're an individual contributor, you can put into action, or if you're a manager or leader, you can start to coach your team and get better performance from them. Sounds like a plan, hopefully, and everybody's bought in. I won't go around and check everybody, but hopefully that works. So this call, first and foremost, just to set the scene, is my colleague Chris Fry. He's been at Allego. He's relatively new to Allego. He's an account executive here, but all of our account executives still prospect as well. So this is a complete cold call. He'll have found a list, created a list, and called this guy and give him a quick call. So we'll listen to the call. We'll dive in at points and break down the call, talk about some coaching moments. If anybody in the chat has any questions, we will monitor it. So like I say, pop your thoughts and questions and comments in the chat, and we'll cover those as and when we can. And we'll play this through and just stop it at certain moments and talk about the coaching moments and how we would deliver coaching and what that coaching looks like. So if you're ready, Owen, I'll hit play and we'll get cracking.
Wait, Stuart, one question. What is the mission that Chris is working towards? What's he been told he's aiming to achieve?
Good question. So this will probably cause a bit of debate. So in our team, a cold call like this, what Chris is trying to do is get the prospect excited enough to book some more time. There's a big debate on, should an SDR be selling the product? Should be getting excited? Our vision is that Chris is just getting enough interest where he can secure more time, and then he can start, more consultative discovery process. So we're really hoping to get some time on the calendar where this prospect is excited enough that they'll give us that time.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's get cracking.
Hello, Remy. Hi, Remy. This is Chris Fry at Allego. It's who, sorry? My name's Chris Fry from Allego. I'll be upfront. This is a cold call. We haven't spoken in the past. Oh, okay. So, okay. If you wanted to hang up, that's fine. Maybe have 30 seconds to explain why I chose to give you a call. Yep.
So we'll pause it there. 17 seconds in. That's Chris's pattern interrupted his opener. Talk us through your thoughts on that one.
So this is one of the things I just referenced that I personally don't use. I don't use a permission-based opener. I'm very old school, just to introduce myself. But I appreciate more and more nowadays it works for people. I get it. I understand the concept of it. And it's worked here, hasn't it? Chris has dropped it. He's got an okay to continue. So if that works for him and he feels natural saying it, if that was somebody who worked for me, I'd say, great, carry on. Use it.
What I'm curious, what would you use instead? What would your kind of opener be?
Mine's very traditional, maybe even quite boring and mundane. I call up, good morning, good afternoon. This is Owen from, and then pause. The pause is the, sorry, let me mute that. The pause is, for me, the very important aspects, because that gives somebody a chance to react in any way, in all sorts of way. And you can suss. If they don't react, you might hear an intake of a breath, and that might suggest to you, oh, okay, this person's already getting their back up a little bit, maybe. There's so much you can learn from that pause, and that 2-3 seconds, that's all it needs to be. Anything longer, it starts to get a bit weird, but you can make out a lot and carry on from there. So, yeah, very old-fashioned, but that's how I do it.
I like it. Let's see what the prospect here has to say to Chris's opener.
Yeah, give me I'm busy, mate, but give me a synopsis of what the call's about, and we can maybe arrange a time to discuss it further. Cool. Yeah. So, I tell you, there's a couple of challenges that I hear from other VPs of sales when I speak to them. Let me run them through, and if they don't make sense, we'll cut the call really quick after that. So if that works okay for you. Okay. Okay. So the first one that I hear quite a lot at the moment, Remy, is that they're trying to grow their sales team, but they're finding that their onboarding process just isn't effective enough because ramp times are too long, or worse, those new hires don't work out at all and they have to start all over again. So it's also taking a lot longer to impact on their revenue goals. Sure. The other one I hear is slightly differently in that they've got no way of identifying which members of their sales team are delivering the message in the right way, which again is then sort of impacting on close rates because reps aren't having as effective conversations they want, but they can't coach them on how to improve that at all. So I was just curious whether, if either of those do sound familiar, like I say, maybe we could get some more time to talk about them, or if not, we'll part on good terms.
Let's pause it there then. So Chris has gone into some pain points to see if the customers facing those, the prospects facing those. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, there's some clear science behind and presented, two pain points. I get it, relevant ones. He asked them really well. They were clear to understand. Hopefully using language that he would typically use, and more importantly, that maybe the prospective client would typically use, language and terminology. And yeah, pose the two questions, and then he's going to ask, are you experiencing any of those? So great questions to ask. Spoiler alert.
What do you think about the length of time? So if we look here, Chris is a minute and 5 seconds or so Chris has spoken for. Do you think that's long enough, too long? What do you think about that?
It's interesting, actually, when you put that as in a number, you would think, oh, actually, that might be too long to be speaking continuously. However, listening to it, it didn't feel too long at all. He asked two very relevant questions in the most simplest way I think they could have been asked to really try and explain the thinking and the pain points. So yeah, looking at the number, I think it might be a bit too long, but actually listening to the call, it didn't sound too long.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it certainly didn't seem too long. I guess the reason why I pointed that out as well, we've already heard from the prospect that he's busy, he needs him to be quick, and now Chris has went on to talk for 1 minute and 5. We're now already 1 minute 30 into this call, and we haven't really gone anywhere. Like, the danger is now, I guess, the prospect just says, it's not a good time, you'll have to ring me back, and jumps off. So that, I guess, the danger of that potentially is one that length of dialogue could be causing some issues.
Yeah. Now, my opinion on that, this goes back to why I don't use a permission-based opener. My mindset, and as I've said before, this is not to say that I'm supremely right, everyone else is wrong, but my mindset is, if you pick up the phone, you're fair game. You've answered the phone. You don't answer the phone if you can't speak. That's how I look at it. Yeah. And so that's why I don't necessarily go for the permission-based opener, because straight away I'm thinking, well, if you've answered the phone, we're having a conversation. I like the way that Chris, he essentially breezed over what Remy did say about, look, I've only got a short bit of time. Chris said breezed over it. He acknowledged it and gave him the opt-out. If I ask him something that's irrelevant, we can cease the call, but kind of just moved past it. And that's how I typically would have approached it. I would have heard what he said, but I would have heard that 1,000,000 times before. Someone saying, oh, look, I haven't got much time. Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, well, I'm sure if I can uncover something that really is a pain point to you, you're going to give me time. And that's my mindset. And I think Chris shared the same.
You're dead right. And I think this is a common mistake that a lot of people make, where sometimes a statement is seen as an objection. And salespeople start to try and tackle that objection, oh, I'm really busy. 90% of the people you call are going to say they're busy. Nobody's going to say, I've got loads of time on. I'm glad you give us a call. Let me just pull up a chair. Everybody's going to say that, but it's not necessarily always an objection. Chris, as you rightly said, has acknowledged it, but then he's kind of got to it. If I was going to be super critical of Chris, I think he could have maybe been a little bit more concise, but I think he's done a really good job of acknowledging it and, like you said, moving past it. Because now, as we notice, we're about to listen to it, but Remy's gone on to speak. So it seems like he's almost forgotten that he didn't have much time now when we're into a conversation. Let's find out what happened.
Good terms. Yeah, fine. We'll probably need to pass on good terms, just because in terms of where we're at as a sales team, we've had a lot of churn and a lot of new starters, but we've been pretty fortunate with our onboarding process and the revenue ramp-ups. We've also integrated Salesforce over the last year, which has given us a lot more data and access to either close rates or performance, which allows us to kind of focus on areas of the sales team where maybe the pitch needs to be addressed or where there's difficulties across their particular patch. So I kind of feel that as a business, it's something that we're kind of on top of at the moment. But I really appreciate your call. No.
Here we go. That's his second way out, trying to get out of this call. He's almost trying to down. Chris gave him that way out, didn't he, as you identified, Owen? And now the prospect's trying to take that. He's trying to take that way out now and get off the phone.
Yeah, I have listened to this call before doing this, so I know how the rest of the call goes, and I don't want to spoil it for the rest of you. But it's confusing because he seems to want to get him off the phone, but then starts divulging where he's at, and he seems to be gives something which sounded to me contradictory. We've had lots of churn, lots of people leave, we've taken on board lots of new starters, and they're onboarding and ramping. We're getting sorted. We think we're doing well. We've got Salesforce, and I think, well, there's a bit of a disconnect there, isn't there? Really, it doesn't sound like everything's going well. If you've got lots of churn, yes, you're having to replace them, but that's just a standstill, isn't it? So yeah, it becomes very interesting, this call, because he does seem to want to get him off the phone, but
he's still on the phone, isn't he? Yeah, he hasn't closed him down totally. He's kind of knocked at that door potentially and said, he's looking to get off, but he hasn't closed that door firmly. There's still a foot in the door for Chris here, and it's a relevant point you bring up as well, Owen, because prospects often don't tell you the truth or don't tell you what they really mean. You're laughing because as well as I do that that's often the case, and that's why we're getting contradictory information. It's hard for a prospect to admit they have challenges when you call them out of the blue. They don't know who you are. You're a stranger. It takes a dent to somebody's pride to say we're experiencing problems. So it's very often the case that prospects won't be forthcoming and saying that they've got those challenges. And I think there's a little bit of that here. But this is a really critical point in this call. I think Chris is now, time's getting to him. Time's getting against him. He's now got to get something that grabs the prospect's attention here and earns him the right to continue the conversation.
Yep.
Let's see what he does. Anybody got any ideas in the chat how they would play this? What they would do at this point? This is quite a big junction. If anybody's got any ideas, pop them in the chat and share.
Thank you, Remy. No, thanks for letting me run through those with you. I mean, it sounds like similar to what I've heard, people working with Salesforce. They got some data, but sometimes that only tells half the story, because obviously there's lots of points in conversations that are actually happening, which don't always get put into the CRM system. No, I know that has been a bigger challenge, getting everyone to use it. So, what's your proposition? What have you got?
Here you go. Now we've got something.
I liked the fact where, again, plenty of people at that previous point would have melted and gone, "Oh, okay, sorry, Remy. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. I'll try and call you back at another time." Yeah. Plenty of salespeople would have crumbled at that point. Credit to Chris. Yeah, again, he heard it, I'm sure, but breezed past it and focused then on one of the 2 points, the key, in my opinion, 2 key points that Remy had divulged to him about. First there was this issue about the churn of new staff, but happy with their onboarding, and then the other point about bringing in Salesforce, which in Remy's opinion was going to enable them to identify these particular coaching points in the sales process. And then Chris gives a relevant response to that, again, hopefully the intent to identify something genuinely that Remy can genuinely attest to feeling. And then he switches completely, doesn't he?
This is the key. When you find something that really resonates and speaks somebody's language, you can almost see, you can imagine the prospect sat up in the chair here. Their ears have pricked up, heard something that's now got them curious and got them interested. Chris has got, the first nibble at that line. This person's interested. I'm curious from everybody on the call. Let's play back what Remy said, and if anybody's brave, let's share some ideas what you would say at this point.
No, I know that has been a bigger challenge, getting everyone to use it. So, what's your proposition? What have you got? So,
anybody want to share their ideas about what they would do at this point? So he's kind of thrown it back to Chris again. the prospect. He said, yeah, that's a real challenge. I'm curious, how you solve it. So anybody want to be brave and share their ideas, how they would, or what they would say next? And if not, Owen, I'll pick on you again. Anyone feeling brave? Nice. Simon, how much of an impact is this having on business? Okay, so Simon, obviously, again, a little bit like earlier, was kind of sidestepping that request from the prospect to tell you what they do and going with a question about what impact that's having on the business. Anybody have anything different? We can help with that. So Karen, would you start to try and close this down and boot the next steps? Is that what you're suggesting? How does that make you feel? Nice. Owen, what about you? What would you do? We've got 3 good suggestions there. What would you do if you were in Chris's shoes here?
Okay, so what do you do? Yeah, or how do you? It was what do you do was the question, wasn't it? Yeah. So what do you do then? Yeah.
Which don't always get put into the CRM system. No, I know that has been the biggest challenge, getting everyone to use it. So what's your proposition? What have you got?
There you go.
Okay. So using the CRM system and getting people to use it was the last thing he said. So what do you do? I would say, well, the good news is I genuinely believe we can help. That's how I'd start, whatever I say next. And then I would use, which I think a couple of people have said, relevant to the things you've just said to me. What's the biggest challenge out of those?
Nice. So trying to get the prospect to talk. I think something is a note for everybody on the call. When somebody asks what you do, the danger as a salesperson, which not many people have suggested, and Owen didn't either, is they go into a pitch or they go into talking about the product. It's so easy as a salesperson when you hear what do you do to think, right, here's my chance to pitch the prospect. And that's totally the wrong thing because they're going to switch off. If somebody says to you, what do you do? Try and think how we help. So reframe that question in your head. When somebody says, what do you do? As a salesperson, you think, how do we help? And then go into how you help. We help sales leaders like you who are struggling to get that visibility, get insight so they can stop leaving revenue on the table or whatever that value proposition is. But you're not talking about your product. You're not talking about what you do. You're talking about how you potentially help that prospect, because this is a danger zone here for me, because a lot of salespeople would trip up here and go into a kind of an elevator pitch and a product dump, which can be really dangerous. Exactly. Something we internally call premature capitulation here at which is it's a big problem for a lot of people. But yeah, it's very common. It's very common. But yeah, some great points.
And I would, with that bit about, clearly you've got to word it from the perspective of them to address the problem they have. Even better if you can do it in context to something said so far. Yeah. Remy, when you said you were having problems, with your churn of your existing salespeople, for example, yeah, and then blah blah blah.
Yeah.
To put it in context to something, so you're showing you're actively listening, and whatever you say next is completely relevant to them.
Totally, yeah, and that's about them using their language, even mirroring them on, the language. I think he said big challenge. You just simply use big challenge. And mirroring them at this point and trying to get them to tell you more, or even a simple question like you mentioned, that's a big challenge. Can you tell me a bit more about that? And get them talking. Let's see what Chris done.
So let's go back to that sort of idea of sort of data in the CRM, right? Yep. People might be good at putting notes in there. They might be good at keeping close dates and deal sizes up to date and are accurate. But there's probably thousands of moments in their conversations where they might have missed a particular pain point from a customer, or they didn't quite handle an objection well enough, and it's led to things going slowly. What we help sales leaders like yourself to do is identify those moments in the conversations that are happening. And how do you do that? So it's using an idea called conversation intelligence. Okay. Sort of capturing.
So let's talk about this thing. So I think Chris has done a relatively decent job here of avoiding the pitch and going too much detail and try to talk about how he's helped. But the prospect here is again asked another question, which they do. How do you do that? And this is another trap as a salesperson that we can easily fall into and start that product pitch. Owen, going back to that, what would you do in this situation now where the prospect's pushing again for more information?
So at that point, how do you do that? Well, I actually probably would have said the same as Chris, just a very simple conversational intelligence, to describe what it is, but not actually the mechanisms of it, Conversational intelligence. Me personally, I then would have asked, are you aware of that? Or a question to see if Remy has heard of conversational intelligence, used it, whatever, in the past. That would have been my first, my reaction to that question.
Nice. And there is no right answers or wrong answers here for sure.
Absolutely.
Me, I'm quite ruthless at going for the meeting now. I would think at this point, we've started to get him interested. And what I would use now is the fact that he said he's got no time against him. So if this was me in this sales conversation, I would probably say something like, "Here, Remy, it sounds like, I've called you in the middle of something. You said you didn't have much time, but it sounds like there's potentially something of interest here or something that's got you curious. Why don't we schedule some more time when it's convenient for you? And I can share exactly how we do that and try and tie this down and get the calendar." Is another option, no right or wrong options, but I think we could get this tied down, get some time in the calendar, and then you can continue to ask questions. If it's comfortable, if the prospects, you're getting the signals that they've got more time, get the calendar sorted, get the meeting sorted, and then everybody relaxes a little bit. You've got the meeting booked. You can start to ask some more questions before you send the calendar invite over and have the meeting. But again, no wrong answer. Let's have a listen to what Chris does here. So he's being tested again, asking what to do. But what you said as well, Owen, I agree with. I think there comes a point where you've got to give the prospect something, or else you're just ignoring them. You sometimes get prospects who say, "What's the price? How much is it?" And you try to avoid that as a salesperson. Same as "Tell me what you do." You've got to give them something. And I think just saying it's conversation intelligence, or we're a conversation intelligence platform, gives them something. But then you try and turn it back and get them talking about them. But let's have a listen how Chris handles it.
Bring voice and video calls and allowing you as a sales leader to pinpoint in on specific moments in conversations that you could help coach reps on how to handle slightly differently.
And how does your technology identify things that I need to focus on, as opposed to me having to listen to a load of recorded calls or voice or video?
We've got him interested now, haven't we?
Yeah. For me, I would have. Sorry if I was just for me, that probably would have been the point that I would have very lightly touched on it and then said, "Well, look, why not then arrange a meeting with somebody else who can, and again, as you said, use what he said before. I know I've taken up X amount of your time. Let's arrange a meeting and somebody can really talk you through it." At that point, I probably would have.
Nice. Yeah, definitely in agreement with you there.
Conferencing.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so rather than just be like a fancy library of calls to listen to, it's analysing those calls as well. So identifying topics or keywords that you define, what they need to be based on your business.
Yeah.
And then enabling you to say, "Show me all calls this week where discounts were mentioned," for example, and cutting down a list of what might be hundreds of calls into 5 or 6 very specific calls, and even moments in those calls that you can help identify areas of potential improvement. Or, for the inside, share with some of the new hires, when you get this situation in a call, this is how our top performers handle it. This is a good talk track to use.
Sure. Okay. It sounds pretty interesting. We do have a lot of business intelligence, and perhaps not what you're offering. So I'm very, very busy. Why don't you ping me an email with a link to your platform and your offering, whatever you've got in terms of creds, and I'll take a look, and maybe we can have another conversation if I think it's relevant.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Classic brush off now. I'm sure we've all had this 100 times. Information. I'll see if it's relevant. I'm curious in the comments. Remy mentioned something here, which is something I definitely want to pick up on. Some little nugget that he gave you where I'd want a question. Did anybody pick up on anything they'd want to ask at this point? That he mentioned. Anybody in the chat think of what he said where they'd want to pick up on it? We haven't got a great deal of time, so I'll give it away. He said it sounds interesting. When you get anything like that from a prospect, sounds interesting, or that sounds good. A really easy question is, what sounds good about that for you?
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. Ed's got it. Yeah, Ed's just died in right at the minute there. What sounds interesting for you? And now what we're doing is getting the prospect to explain to us why that sounds interesting in their world. They're almost selling your product to themselves. And they're also giving you the reasons why it's interesting. And that was subtle. It was a tiny thing that Remy said here, sounds interesting. And 90% of salespeople probably would have missed it. But just picking up on that and asking what sounds interesting, as Ed said there, can open up a whole host of possibilities.
Am I right, Stuart? Maybe a little plug for the product that you can configure it to tag to recognize whenever that question comes up. And then if the rep doesn't ask that follow-up question, what sounds interesting, it can spit them out a video or give them some real-time coaching saying, prospect said this, you didn't say this, try this next time, yeah?
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. I told you he was good. He's selling Allego better than we do, but yeah, it's exactly what it does. Yeah, exactly what it does. But Chris again's in another danger zone here. You know, the prospect's kind of given him something, saying I'm interested, but then he's receded back and said, just send me some information. I'll see if it's relevant. So we've all been in this situation now. Let's see how Chris handles this.
Can certainly send some information over. Well, how about I suggest this? Maybe we pencil some time in for next week. I'll send some stuff over in the meantime.
Okay.
And if you think it's relevant, then we'll go ahead with that call. If not, just let me know, and I'll give you some time back in your diary. Does that sound like it might work?
Yeah, that sounds good. Think it over, mate. And I promise you I'll respond. And if relevant, we'll get 30 minutes in next week.
Yeah. Well, apart from obviously Monday with the extra day off, is there any day next week that works best for you?
Let me just check.
I think Chris has done a really good job here. He's doing stuff there, and he's also done a give-get, which is nice. The prospect asks for something, but Chris wants something back. As a salesperson, remember you're equal to your prospects. If you're going to give them something, get something back. I'm happy to send that for you, Remy. But what I want back from you is some time in the calendar to follow up and get your thoughts next week. And he tried to get off the line, but Chris has done a good job here saying when next week works, and he's trying to secure the meeting, and he's being descriptive about what the next steps are. So I think he's done a really good job here in tying this down. This is just kind of calendar invites and tying this up, the meat of the conversations here. And we have got one more that I want to listen to for you. But you can see how many coaching moments can come out. It's a 6-minute call, how many talking points we had. And Chris is good. Chris is really good at what he does. It's a good cold call. And there's still that many coaching moments that we've gone into. Sean is equally good. Similar, being relatively new here at Allego. He's one of our SDRs. This is another call that's 6 minutes long. So we'll listen to this one. We've got sort of 10 minutes or so. Let's have a listen to this one, and we'll talk through some of the key moments.
Hi, thank you. Sean here from a company called Allego. I'll be completely upfront. We've never spoken before. Just want to 35 seconds just to explain why I speak with yourself today.
Yeah, sure.
Great, I really appreciate that.
Bit different. Again, permission based, different pattern interrupt, but he's got the desired result, hasn't he?
Yeah, and it seemed to roll off his tongue quite easily. So, yeah, thumbs up.
100%. And that's a good point you make as well, Owen. Like, it's sometimes not what you say, it's how you say it. If you've got enough confidence and conviction in what you say, people listen and people go along with you. And I think Sean's done a really good job there of, getting the tone, the speed, the pace all spot on with his opener there.
And obviously, if what I say doesn't resonate, we can just quickly end the call there. So I speak with a lot of successful sales enablement leaders. We're already helping sales leaders run successful and effective teams, run into a couple of key challenges, and just wanted to see if either of these were relevant in your world. The first is they're frustrated as they know each member of the team, new or old, learns differently, but despite best efforts, don't have the time or the systems are too rigid to suit each individual learner. Also, they know they've got the A players, but struggle to capture and share with the rest of the team what they're doing differently to help raise the bar, especially when things are changing so rapidly from week to week. Just curious, out of those two problems, what do you find yourself bumping into the most?
Let's talk about that then. So again, Sean's probably a bit less here. We're talking about 45 seconds for his pain points, so 20 seconds less than Chris. I think what's interesting, I'd love to get your thoughts on as well, Owen, is how he's positioned the end of this. So if we just listen to what he said there.
Out of those two problems, what do you find yourself bumping into the most?
Out of those two problems, which do you find yourself bumping into the most? It's quite presumptive, isn't it?
It is. I'm hoping that the two questions he asked, he had already kind of through prior research, maybe had a good educated guess that they may be problems she's facing. Now, on the actual, that whole section, to be frank, if I was coaching that guy, I'd play that back to him and ask him how he thinks he sounds, because to me, it sounded like he was reading from a script. Yeah, those two questions weren't rolling off his tongue. And also, yeah, I don't know the guy. He may well speak like that, but a lot of terminology, I was thinking, would you really talk like that? You know, is the other person talking like that? That was just when I was listening to it, the thought process, it was coming to me. Just think it didn't sound natural, free flowing.
Good point. It wasn't as natural as his opener, was it?
No.
The opening 15 seconds seemed like it just rolled off his tongue, and it was practice and pitch perfect. This was a little bit more robotic. I think that's a good point. With cold calling, it's easier said than done. And I know there's pressure on cold calls, and it's a difficult situation. Everybody gets a little bit, nervous about it. But try and call and use the speed and pace as you're speaking to a friend. And that's what you want to come across. You don't want to make it too where you're trying to be too corporate, or people talk about people having a telephone voice and all that kind of rubbish. Like, try yourself. The person on the other end of the line is a human, just like you are. Just speak normally. Try and be your friendly self, and don't be that robot, because nobody wants to listen to something that sounds scripted or robotic. But I do like the problems themselves. I think they are good. I think they could definitely be improved. And I also quite like, to be fair to Sean here, I actually quite like his presumptive clause. He's not said, are any of those familiar in your world? He's actually said, which of those is most familiar in your world? Really brave, quite presumptive. But again, when it goes back to your point, it's an educated guess that who he's calling has these problems. It's knowing your customers or your prospects and being confident that what you're ringing about really is going to be and add value for them.
Yeah, I mean, he did attest to other people. I think he said it was him, or maybe it was Chris, but other people in your industry. Did he say that at the beginning? Countering these problems, or we're working with other people.
Yeah, I think they both said. I think Chris said VPs of sales or sales leaders like you, and I think Sean said something similar about people in your industry. And yeah, it's trying to make it familiar for people, as you rightly said. Let's have a look what response we get here from the prospect.
Probably a little bit of both, but we are actually addressing them. We're working with some software vendors to obtain sales enablement software, first of all for content management, and second of all something similar to Gong, where you can record calls and get insights from the recording.
I'm curious, do you mind just asking who that is?
Yeah, we're speaking with HighSpot, and we're speaking with MindTickle.
Okay, so we sit in the same wheelhouse as those,
yeah,
with the conversation intelligence, the content management. So I don't know whether it would be worth, if that's something you're looking at, just a quick conversation, share some ideas, just to see if there's anything, the challenges that you're facing, just to see if there's anything we might be able to help with on that side.
I don't know about you, Owen, but I like where Sean's gone, but I think he's been a bit weak. It's easy. I don't know if it would be would it make sense, rather than being prescriptive and telling the prospect, look, given that you're looking at these technologies, it would make sense for you to have a look at us as well. And we can share some ideas so you can make an informed decision who's the best solution for you. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that little.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. The one thing that maybe stood out from this particular section was wheelhouse. I heard we're in the same wheelhouse. I was thinking, what's a wheelhouse? And again, it's just maybe it was that point, using wording that other people use. I've never heard anybody refer to a wheelhouse. I'm going to guess he means the kind of same bracket, whatever quadrant of Gartner. I don't know, but yeah, it just sounded very strange wording. And you're right, he could have maybe been more direct in tying up, this is why we should continue the conversation.
100%. Let's have a wheelhouse. I speak with quite a lot of US customers. I think it probably resonates more in the US. It's not something we really tend to use in the UK. But you're right, it's using language that isn't familiar, because there's a good chance the prospect's thinking the same as what you were. What the hell's a wheelhouse? I don't know what you're talking about. Again, another tip for everybody, keep it simple. You don't need to use fancy language, just keep it simple so everybody can understand. I remember somebody saying to me years ago, try and imagine you're pitching the product to your gran or to your elderly parent or whatever, and try and keep it that simple. And I think that is relevant, and just use the most simple language that you can. Let's have a listen to the rest.
I think probably because we're still in the research phase, the best thing would be maybe for you to drop me details, and then when I come to do the assessment of lining up the products and seeing what does what, I can then obviously get in contact with you at that point and make some comparisons.
No, absolutely. So when you kind of reached out to look for kind of HighSpot and MindTickle, what were the challenges that you were trying to solve? I know I mentioned a couple there that kind of resonate. What were the main ones that you were like, right, I need to get on the internet and find these companies to solve these problems?
I didn't actually go searching, to be honest. They found me.
Okay.
The content management piece was actually something our product marketing team were pushing for, which is why we ended up speaking to HighSpot, who were helping us build out the business case. And obviously at that point, I can then do some competitive analysis. And then, but MindTickle reached out to me initially, so it's them who kind of highlighted the functionality that they offer.
No, absolutely. To be fair, it is a very...
I quite like where Sean's tried to go there, but it's backfired a little bit. He's tried to go, what were the problems you were looking to solve when you were evaluating these vendors, but he's not really got an answer to his question. He could have changed the question then, I think, and said, I appreciate they reached out to you. What got you excited about speaking with them then? What you're hoping to achieve, why you're evaluating this technology, to try and get to the crux of the issue, I guess. Because again, prospects lie to you, as we said earlier, but they also don't answer your questions. And as a salesperson, sometimes you need to be brave and ask the question again, or reframe the question if you don't necessarily get the answer to what you're trying to ask. Prospects can be like politicians, where they don't necessarily answer what you're trying to ask them.
Absolutely.
Let's have a listen what Sean tries here.
Competitive market, and every kind of different company has its own strengths, depending on what kind of things that you're looking to solve and what the main headaches were for you. That's why it's kind of, like you said, good to get a good stretch across the market and see which one particularly suits the challenges that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just double check. So for your email, I've got Katie, as his kind of first name dot last name at dex.com.
He's sending some information, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it could have, at that earlier point when she said, look, we're in the research phase, this is what we're doing, send me an email when I'm ready, I'll come back to you, that point, there might have been an opportunity to clarify, to tie in essentially what he tried to do. He asked about the challenges. I'm going to guess, educated guess, his rationale was to try and make then whatever he sends on email relevant to what she said. But maybe he could have just asked that at that very point. Yeah, happy to send you an email, just so I can make sure it's of most relevance to you. Blah, 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 blah. What are the main challenges? Or what would you like to see in the email? What do you need to see?
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with you there. Another tactic, which I think Sean could have tried here as well, is almost trying to qualify the person out. So they've mentioned the speaking with competitors already, like pushing on that door. You mentioned you're speaking with HighSpot and MindTickle at the moment. You said you just want to speak to us in a couple of months. I'm guessing you're too far down the line with those guys to consider an alternative, or not? Because it might be that she is. She might say, well, yeah, we probably are. We've done too much. And then you can get out the deal. Or it might be that she says, well, no, I wouldn't say that. And then you can say, well, what I would suggest is we schedule some 10 minutes so you can make an informed decision about what the best solution is. If in that 10 minutes I haven't got you excited enough to continue the conversation about Allego, then we can part as friends. How does that sound? And that angle of trying to qualify out, not being the classic salesperson who's trying to crowbar the meeting in, I think could pay dividends here. Because I would hedge my bets that Katie probably is quite far down the line with competitors at this stage by the sounds of things. But would it be ridiculous for you to have a quick look at Allego in 10 minutes to see if it makes sense to evaluate it further? I think that would probably have been my play here, to try and almost qualify her out and see if the prospect actually qualifies themselves back in here. Guys, this is a 45-minute webinar, so we'll come up to time. If everybody needs to be off, that's absolutely fine. I do have a few minutes if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to ask, so please feel free to pop them in the chat or ask the questions. Owain, I don't know about yourself. If you've got a couple of minutes, feel free to hang on, but that was really, really helpful. It's good to get the take of somebody like yourself who's been there and done it and coached others how to do it. It was really good to get your thoughts, and thanks for sharing and being so generous with your time and sharing your thoughts and valuable experience, mate. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, happy to stick around for a few minutes. I mean, ultimately, that's why I asked right at the beginning, what's the mission that's given to these people, and essentially to get people excited. But meetings are They book meetings. What you won't hear from the rest of you, Sean does book the meeting, I think, doesn't he? Yeah, he does. He sends information. Yeah, he does book a meeting, and Chris did with Remy. Great, fantastic. Were they thoroughly thrilled and excited? Not yet, I'd say so, but enough to have gotten to a meeting. So ultimately, that's the outcome that they're gunning for. It's a thumbs up on those, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's a thumbs up, but I think that you raise a valid point as well. You know, the likelihood of that not taking place could be quite high and exciting. So there is a potential with that. But I don't think there's any questions. Hopefully that was helpful for people, you know, and demonstrates how coaching can be done. And, you know, hopefully people got some actionable takeaways from that, both in terms of how to make cold calls, but how to coach. Connect with us on LinkedIn. It was great to speak. And, you know, there's another webinar straight after this one. Hopefully some of you join us for that. We'll have plenty more coming up in the future. So thanks very much for your time, everyone.
Good man. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thanks again, Owen. Appreciate it, mate. You're a gent.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.